My name is Elara, and the night my father threw me out into a snowstorm, I had exactly $312 in my checking account, a dead phone, and the sound of my sister's laughter ringing in my ears. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of the house I had been paying for, and she said something I will never forget. She said, "Have fun freezing, sweetheart. You won't last a week." She was wrong, because what my sister didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been preparing for this moment longer than they realized. And in just 11 days, every lie she had ever told would come crashing down on her so hard she would be the one standing on my doorstep, begging. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand what kind of family I came from, to understand why I stayed as long as I did. I grew up in Cedar Falls, Minnesota, a small town where everyone knew your name and your business. Our house sat at the end of Birch Lane, a 2-story colonial with green shutters and a wraparound porch. From the outside, it looked like something out of a magazine. My mother used to tend the garden every spring, planting tulips along the walkway. She died when I was 14, ovarian cancer, and when she left, she took whatever warmth that house had ever held. My father, Harold, was a retired postal worker. He collected a pension and Social Security, enough to cover the basics but not much else. After Mom died, he changed. Not all at once. It was gradual, like watching paint fade. He became bitter, short-tempered, and somewhere along the way he decided that my older sister Vivian could do no wrong, and I could do no right. Vivian was 29, 3 years older than me. She had never held a job longer than 4 months. She had a way about her, though, a charm that could make you believe anything. She would look at you with these big doe eyes and her voice would go soft and sweet, and you would find yourself nodding along to whatever she said, even when your gut told you it was a lie. My father was completely under her spell. She lived at home rent-free, contributed nothing, and somehow convinced him that she was the dutiful daughter and I was the burden. I was a registered nurse at Cedar Falls General. I worked the night shift in the ICU, 12-hour rotations, 3 to 4 nights a week. My take-home pay after taxes was about $2,800 a month. Out of that, I gave my father $800 for what he called household expenses, even though I also bought most of the groceries and paid the electric bill, because Vivian ran the heat like we lived in the tropics. After my own car payment, insurance, student loans, and the little bit I managed to put into savings, I was left with almost nothing. I had been saving for months to move out, slowly building a small fund in a separate account that nobody knew about. I had about $4,200 tucked away. I was so close to freedom I could taste it, but Vivian could sense it too. She always could. When I started coming home lighter, smiling more, she watched me the way a cat watches a bird through glass. The first thing she did was small. I came home from a double shift one Tuesday morning, exhausted down to my bones, and found my nursing shoes in the trash. The good ones, the ones with the orthopedic insoles I had saved up for. Vivian was on the couch scrolling her phone. I pulled the shoes from the garbage, holding them up. Why were these in the trash? She didn't even look up. Oh, I thought those were old. They smelled. They didn't smell. They were 3 months old. I said nothing. I cleaned them off and put them back in my room. That was mistake number 1. Every time I said nothing, she took it as permission to go further. The next week, my father called me into the kitchen. He was sitting at the table, arms crossed, his reading glasses perched on his nose. That was his serious talk posture. "Your sister tells me you've been bringing people over while I'm asleep." I stared at him. "What? I work nights. I'm not even here." Vivian says she heard noises. Strange voices. I looked at Vivian, who was leaning against the refrigerator with a glass of orange juice, watching me with the faintest trace of a smile. "That's a lie," I said flatly. "I have never brought anyone into this house." My father held up a hand. "I don't want excuses. This is my house, and I won't have strangers coming and going. Dad, I just told you it didn't happen." He shook his head. "Vivian has no reason to lie." I almost laughed. Vivian had every reason to lie. Lying was her entire personality, but arguing with my father was like arguing with a wall. He had already decided. Things escalated from there. Over the next month, a series of small disasters kept happening, and every single one got pinned on me. My father's reading glasses went missing. Vivian said she saw me moving things around in the living room. A scratch appeared on the kitchen table. Vivian said I had dragged my work bag across it. A bill went unpaid, and the water got shut off for 2 days. Vivian said she had given me the bill to mail and I must have forgotten. I hadn't. She had never given me anything. But here's the thing people don't understand about living in a house like that. You stay because leaving feels like admitting they were right about you. You stay because some tiny, desperate part of you still believes that if you work hard enough, if you prove yourself enough, they will finally see you. I know how stupid that sounds now. Trust me. I know. The night everything shattered was a Thursday in February. Minnesota in February is no joke. It was 8 below zero outside, the kind of cold that hurts your teeth when you breathe. I had just gotten home from a brutal shift. We had lost a patient, a 52-year-old father of 3, cardiac arrest. I was emotionally gutted. All I wanted was a hot shower and my bed. When I walked through the door, my father was standing in the hallway. His face was a shade of red I had never seen before. Behind him, Vivian stood with her arms crossed, and even in my exhaustion I noticed it. She was trying to look concerned, but her eyes were bright with something else entirely. Excitement. "Where is it?" my father said. Not a question. A demand. I set my bag down slowly. "Where is what?" "My money. The cash I kept in the lockbox in my bedroom. $3,000. Gone." My stomach dropped. "Dad, I don't know anything about—" Vivian cut in, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. "I didn't want to say anything, but I saw her going into your room yesterday while you were at the store. She was in there for a while. I thought it was weird, but I didn't want to assume." She let the sentence trail off, and I watched my father's expression harden into something I had never seen directed at me before. Not anger. Contempt. "I didn't take your money," I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "Dad, I have my own income. Why would I steal from you?" "Because you're greedy," he said. "You always have been. Your sister has been telling me for months that things go missing whenever you're around, and I kept giving you the benefit of the doubt. Not anymore." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "Vivian is lying. She has been lying about me for years, and you refuse to see it." My father slammed his fist on the hallway table so hard the vase on top rattled. "Don't you dare talk about your sister like that. Vivian doesn't have a dishonest bone in her body." I looked at Vivian. She met my gaze, and she smiled. Not a big smile, just the slightest curl at the corner of her lips. A smile that said, "I win." Something inside me cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Because I still had enough left in me to fight. "Fine," I said. "If you're so sure I took it, call the police. Let them investigate." For a split second, something flickered across Vivian's face. Fear. It was there and gone so fast I almost missed it. But I caught it, and I filed it away. My father didn't call the police. Instead, he said the words that ended everything. "I want you out of this house. Tonight." I stared at him. "It's 8 below zero outside. You should have thought about that before you stole from me." "I didn't steal from you!" My voice cracked. He pointed at the door. "Get out. Now. And don't you dare take anything that isn't yours." I looked at Vivian one more time. She was already turning away, heading toward the living room, and over her shoulder she said it. Casual, like she was commenting on the weather. "Have fun freezing, sweetheart. You won't last a week." I went upstairs. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open my dresser drawer. I grabbed a duffel bag and shoved in whatever I could reach. Clothes, my phone charger, my nursing license folder, my wallet. I checked my phone. It was at 4%. I didn't have time to charge it. I threw on my heaviest coat, my boots, gloves, a hat. I grabbed my car keys off the nightstand. Then I stopped, because I realized something. My car was in the driveway, and the title was in my name. He couldn't take that. I also realized something else. The separate savings account, the $4,200. It was in an online bank. Vivian didn't know it existed. My father didn't know it existed. They thought they were sending me out into the cold with nothing. They were wrong. I walked downstairs, past my father who wouldn't look at me, past the living room where Vivian had already settled into the couch like nothing had happened. I opened the front door, and the cold hit me like a physical blow. My breath crystallized instantly. The snow was coming down sideways. I got in my car, turned the heat on full blast, and sat there for a long moment. My phone buzzed. 3%. I opened my contacts, scrolled to a name, and hit call. "Jess," I said when she picked up. "I need a place to stay." Jessica Chen was my best friend since nursing school. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, and she didn't even hesitate. "Get over here. I'll make the couch up. That first night at Jess's apartment, I didn't cry. I sat on her couch wrapped in a blanket, holding a mug of tea she had pressed into my hands, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. The fog of trying to earn my father's love, the constant anxiety of living under Vivian's manipulations, it was lifting. And underneath it was anger. Clean, sharp, focused anger. I'm done, I said quietly. Jess looked at me. Done how? Done letting them win. Vivian stole that money. I know she did. And I'm going to prove it. The next morning, I went to my bank and confirmed my savings were untouched. I transferred the $800 from my checking, the money I would have given my father that month, into savings instead. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital. The charge nurse, a woman named Deborah, who had always looked out for me, took one look at my face when I showed up and said, "Whatever happened, you're tougher than it." I almost cried then. Almost. Over the next few days, I did something I should have done years ago. I started building a case. Not in a legal sense, not yet. But I sat down and I wrote everything out. Every lie Vivian had told. Every time something went missing and I got blamed. Every dollar I had put into that household. Dates, amounts, details. I pulled up my bank statements, showing the monthly transfers to my father's account. I pulled up receipts for groceries, utilities, the new furnace I had helped pay for 2 winters ago. I documented everything. And then, on day 4, I got the call that changed everything. My phone rang at 6 in the morning. It was my father's number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. It wasn't my father. It was Vivian, and she was crying. Dad collapsed. He's at Cedar Falls General. They think it's his heart. I was already grabbing my keys before she finished the sentence. When I got to the hospital, I found my father in the cardiac unit, hooked up to monitors, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. The doctor on call was someone I knew, Dr. Patel. He pulled me aside and told me it was a mild heart attack. He would need to stay for observation, and likely need a stent procedure. He was stable, but it was serious. Vivian was in the waiting room, mascara streaked down her face. When she saw me, she stood up, and for a moment I thought she might actually hug me. Instead, she said, "The hospital is asking about insurance. I don't know any of his information." Of course she didn't. I did. Because I had been the one managing his prescriptions, scheduling his checkups, making sure his Medicare paperwork was in order. I handled everything while Vivian handled nothing. I spoke with the billing department. I spoke with the nursing staff. I made sure he was comfortable, checked his chart, adjusted his pillow. And the entire time, Vivian sat in the waiting room scrolling her phone. That evening, while my father was sleeping and Vivian had gone to the cafeteria, I ran into Deborah in the hallway. She looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes and said, "I heard your dad's here. You okay?" I nodded. Then she said something that stopped me cold. I also heard something else. One of the ER nurses said your sister was in here last week, paid in cash for an elective consultation. Dermatology, I think. Spent quite a bit. She paused. Thought you'd want to know. Cash. Vivian, who hadn't worked in over a year, paid in cash for an elective procedure. My mind raced. $3,000 goes missing from my father's lockbox. And suddenly, Vivian is spending cash she shouldn't have. When Vivian came back from the cafeteria, I was sitting in the chair beside our father's bed. I didn't say anything about what Deborah had told me. Not yet. Instead, I watched. And I waited. Over the next 3 days, I took care of everything. I drove to the house to pick up my father's medication, his insurance cards, his comfortable robe. I coordinated with the doctors. I worked my shifts and then came back during visiting hours. Vivian showed up once, stayed for 20 minutes, complained about the vending machine coffee, and left. On day 7, my father was awake and alert enough to talk. Vivian wasn't there. It was just the two of us in that quiet hospital room with the beeping monitors and the pale afternoon light coming through the window. He looked at me for a long time before he spoke. "Vivian hasn't been here much." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He looked down at his hands, thin and bruised from the IV lines. "She said she'd handle things at the house. Said she'd bring me my things." He paused. "She hasn't brought anything." "I brought your things," I said quietly. 3 days ago." He nodded slowly. The silence between us was thick and heavy. I could see the thoughts moving behind his eyes, slow and painful, like a man trying to walk on a broken leg. He was starting to see it, but he wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. On day 9, I made my move. I had been thinking about it carefully, and I didn't want to act out of anger. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. I called my father's house from the hospital lobby. Vivian picked up on the third ring, her voice lazy and relaxed, the voice of someone who had the house to herself and was enjoying every minute of it. "Hey, Viv," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Dad's asking about his lockbox. He wants me to bring it to the hospital so he can sort some paperwork." There was a pause, just a beat too long. "His lockbox?" "Yeah, the one in his bedroom closet. Can you check if it's still there?" Another pause. "I mean, it should be." "Why wouldn't it be? Just check, please." I heard her moving, footsteps, a door opening, then silence. And in that silence, I heard everything I needed to hear. "It's here," she said, her voice slightly higher than before. Nervous. "Great. Is there anything in it?" "I didn't open it. It's locked. Dad says the key is in his nightstand drawer. Can you check how much cash is inside?" The silence this time was longer. I could practically hear her calculating. "Why does it matter right now? He's in the hospital. He's worried about it, Viv. Just count it for me." I heard the lockbox open, and then Vivian said, There's money in here." "How much?" "I don't know. A few hundred, maybe." "Count it." Her voice came back strained. "About 500. My father had told me there was 3,000 in that box. Vivian had told him it was all gone and I had taken it. Now she was saying there was 500, which meant either she had already spent most of it and put some back to cover herself, or she was lying about the amount right now. Either way, the story she had told, the one that got me thrown out, was falling apart. "That's weird," I said calmly. "Dad said there should be 3,000 in there, and you told him it was empty. Remember? The night you said I stole it?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "I have to go," she said, and hung up. On day 11, my father was discharged. I drove him home. Vivian was not there when we arrived. Her car was gone, and so was her suitcase. But what she had left behind told the story better than any words could. I helped my father to the couch, and then I walked him through the house. The pantry was nearly empty. She had eaten through the groceries and bought nothing. The thermostat was set to 82 degrees. The electric bill, which I said on the kitchen counter, was $430. There was a receipt from a $760. Cash. And tucked under Vivian's mattress, because she had never been particularly creative, was a stack of bills. I counted it in front of my father. $1,800. He sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the money in my hands. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was barely a whisper. "She told me you took it." "I know." I believed her. "I know. I threw you out into the cold. It was 8 below that night." "I know, Dad." He put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. I had never seen my father cry. Not when Mom died. Not once. But he cried then. And I stood there watching, holding $1,800 of the money that had nearly cost me everything. I didn't comfort him. I want to be honest about that. I didn't put my hand on his shoulder. I didn't tell him it was okay. Because it wasn't okay. It wouldn't be okay for a long time. What I did say was this: "I'm not moving back in." He looked up, his eyes red. "Elara, I found an apartment. I signed the lease yesterday. I move in next week." He opened his mouth, then closed it. He nodded. And in that nod, I saw something I had been waiting my entire life to see. Not love. Exactly. That was always there, buried under the favoritism and the blindness. What I saw was recognition. He finally saw me for who I really was. And he saw Vivian for who she really was. And the weight of that knowledge was crushing him. Vivian came back 4 days later. I know because my father called me. His voice was different now, smaller, uncertain. "Your sister is here. She wants to talk." "I don't. She's saying she's sorry. She's crying." Vivian always cries when she gets caught. It doesn't mean she's sorry. It means she's scared. He was quiet for a moment. What should I do? I almost couldn't believe it. My father, the man who had ruled that house like a king for decades, was asking me what to do. "That's your decision, Dad. But if you let her stay, set boundaries. Real ones. She pays rent. She gets a job. She doesn't get to lie her way through life anymore." Whether he followed through, that was on him. I had spent 26 years trying to fix that family. I was done fixing. I was done proving. I was done being the one who gave everything and got blamed for it. My apartment was small. A studio, really. One room, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom with a shower that took 3 minutes to get hot. But it was mine. The first night I slept there, I lay in bed listening to the silence. No footsteps in the hallway. No Vivian whispering lies in the next room. No father slamming tables. Just quiet. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, I slept through the entire night. Jess came over the next evening with a bottle of wine and a potted plant. "Every home needs something alive in it," she said, setting the plant on my windowsill. We sat on the floor because I didn't have a couch yet, drinking wine out of paper cups, and she asked me if I was happy. I thought about it. "I'm not happy yet," I said. "But I'm free. And right now, that's enough." 3 weeks later, Vivian called me. I almost didn't recognize the number because she had gotten a new phone. Her voice was thin, stripped of its usual performance. "I got a job," she said, "at the grocery store. Part-time." I waited. Dad made me start paying rent. $300 a month. I still waited. "I know you're not going to forgive me," she said. "I'm not asking you to. I just wanted you to know I'm trying." I sat with that for a moment. Trying is a start, Vivian. But trying doesn't undo what you did. You stole from Dad and let me take the blame. You got me thrown out in the middle of winter. You did it with a smile on your face. She didn't argue. She didn't make excuses. For the first time in our entire lives, my sister had nothing to say. "I hope you figure it out," I said. "I really do. But I'm not going to be the one who helps you. Not this time." I hung up, set my phone on the counter, and looked around my tiny apartment. The plant Jess gave me was catching the last bit of evening sunlight. The wine bottle from the other night was sitting by the sink, waiting to be recycled. My scrubs were draped over the back of the single chair I owned. It wasn't much, but every inch of it was earned. Every inch of it was mine. People tell you that karma is about revenge, about watching the people who hurt you suffer. But that's not what karma felt like to me. Karma felt like waking up on a Tuesday morning in my own apartment, making coffee in my own kitchen, driving to a job where people respected me, and knowing that not a single person in my life had the power to make me feel like I was nothing. That was karma, not their suffering. My freedom. My father and I talk now. Not often, and not easily, but we talk. He calls on Sundays, and our conversations are short, a little awkward, full of long pauses. He's learning. Slowly. He told me last week that Vivian got promoted to full-time at the grocery store. He said it like he was waiting for me to be proud of her. I just said, "Good for her," and I meant it. Not because I've forgiven her. I haven't. But because her life is not my responsibility anymore. Sometimes I drive past the old house on Birch Lane, the green shutters, the wraparound porch, the garden that hasn't been tended since Mom died. It still looks the same from the outside, but I know better now. A house can look perfect from the street and be completely hollow inside. And a tiny studio apartment with a cracked shower and a second-hand chair can feel more like home than any mansion ever could. If you're out there right now, stuck in a house that doesn't feel like home, surrounded by people who make you feel small, I want you to know something. You don't have to wait for them to change. You don't have to earn their love. You don't have to prove that you're enough. You already are. The hardest part isn't leaving. The hardest part is believing you deserve to. But you do. Trust me, you do. If this story hit home, if you've been through something like this, tell me about it in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories about people who refuse to stay broken, subscribe. There's more to come. A lot more.